January is in the rearview mirror. I didn't watch nearly as much shit this month as I did last month. Last month I went a bit crazy because it was Christmas, I had some time off. But this month I've actually had some stuff on. And my video on The Curse took fucking forever to make. That took like 2 full weeks of undivided attention. So this should be a nice, quick, easy one. Like, well, quick comparatively. It's still going to be a long, tedious video, but not as long or tedious as last month's. And as I did last month, I'll try and avoid spoilers, but if I do spoil something, I'll put a big spoiler tag on the screen. So you know there will be spoilers ahead, and you can just skip forward to the next thing, or you can cover your eyes and ears and go la 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 la. Alright, everything I watched in January. Let's go. The Rehearsal. After becoming obsessed with The Curse and being really into Nathan Fielder and that, and then going back and watching Nathan For You, then I watched The Rehearsal, which was his show in between those shows. And it's a really wild experimental thing. I mean, it's set in episode 1. It sets up this premise that you can predict how a difficult situation is going to go, and if you can plan everything down to the last detail, then you don't have to be worried about an uncomfortable situation. And the first one is a guy has been lying to his pub quiz friends about his educational background, and Nathan builds like a mock-up of the bar down to the last detail and gets the questions for the upcoming quiz and gets an actor to meet the woman he's going to be confessing to and to copy her mannerisms and play her in the interaction. And that would have been really interesting if that was every episode. There's just a different person doing a different thing like that. But then in episode 2, it kind of goes off the rails in a really interesting way, where there's a woman who's rehearsing for motherhood, and they're trying to cram 18 years of parenthood into a few weeks. And then somewhere along the way, Nathan comes in and starts rehearsing as the dad. And then the show completely goes off in its own direction and becomes its own thing. I thought it was just mind-blowing. I thought it was like a TV masterpiece. I'd never seen anything like it. It was just really interesting, really innovative stuff. Sing. I'd never seen Sing, but my family were always raving about it. And one night I was around at their house and we put it on. And I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It's, a great voice cast and a great soundtrack and just a really, feel-good story. I thought it was wonderful. It was like a perfect, family movie. I can see why it was so successful now. Bottoms. Watched Bottoms again. I can pretty much recite this movie from memory at this point. But I just love it. I don't know. It's a really great movie and really well made, but there's been a lot of really great, really well made movies recently. I haven't watched them 18 times in 3 months, so I don't know. I think maybe part of it is that it's a Gen Z movie that's actually made by Gen Z. This isn't this isn't some middle-aged Hollywood screenwriter's interpretation of what a Gen Z kid might say or might do. This feels like the most accurate portrayal of Gen Z kids in high school because the makers of it were Gen Z kids in high school a few years ago. But it has this really absurdist layer and this really dark layer to it that's not, this isn't just a standard high school movie, this is the most fucked up high school movie. But it's also sweet, and even though it has this crazy premise of a fight club, there's still the heartwarming sense of community amongst the fight club and this feeling of a found family scenario. It's just really spectacularly done to get a movie that is that dark and crazy and out there and not trying at all to be set in the real world, but also find a way to weave some grounded emotions in there. I fucking love it. Star Wars. This is the original Star Wars. It's now branded as Episode 4: A New Hope, but it was back in 1977 when it was released. It was just Star Wars. They were playing this at my local cinema. Me and my dad went down to watch it, and this might be the biggest crowd I've ever seen at a cinema. Certainly for something that everyone could just watch on Disney Plus at home. The most recent time I can remember seeing a theater that jam-packed was the Barbenheimer weekend, going to see both of them on the opening weekend. But this movie is 50 years old. It just goes to show what a timeless gem it is. And I don't think I've ever seen this one on a big screen before, so it was kind of amazing to see what kids in 1977, when they were lining up down the block to watch it 5 times a day, the real escapism that they felt, that they truly. You go into this dark room, you've got this massive screen with the huge Imperial Star Destroyer looming over the screen. You get a feeling of true escapism, and you really are transported to a galaxy far, far away. I mean, I didn't get exactly the experience they had in 1977, because they didn't have those crappy CGI insert shots all over Mos Eisley Spaceport. Some of those shots are, especially the ones where it's an entirely CG shot. It's not a shot that was in the movie filmed on an actual camera and then they implemented some CG on top of it. There's a crane shot of the land speeder coming into the spaceport, and it just looks hideous. It looks like a cutscene from a PS1 game. And the big screen didn't do those shots any fucking favors. They look better on a small screen. There's that one bit where George Lucas has an alien crawl past the, like, right in front of the camera and fill the entire frame with its arse. And there's that weird scene that was thrown back in with Jabba the Hutt and Boba Fett. And this was after they made Return of the Jedi and decided that Jabba's a ginormous slug and not a human man. And there's just this really awkward thing where Harrison Ford, if he walks around the back of Jabba, it's fine if he's a man, but because he's got a massive tail, they've had to like move him so he's like stepping over his tail. It's just so awkward and weird. And then the last line of the scene is Han turns to Jabba and says, Jabba, you're a wonderful human being.
Jabba, you're a wonderful human being.
He's not a human being anymore, so that doesn't make any fucking sense. It just doesn't, I mean, even if you could overlook all the weird CG they've done with it, and, you know, it's hard to overlook because a CG Hutt looks horrendous. A real practical puppet version of a Hutt, like you see in Return of the Jedi, looks amazing, but the CG versions of Hutts look terrible. But even if you could overlook that scene doesn't even need to be there. It's already established that Han owes money to Jabba, and taking this job from Luke and Ben Kenobi, he's going to be able to pay back his debt. So you don't need to have a scene where he talks to Jabba and sees his henchmen, you know? But anyway, other than that, other than all those changes, it's a perfect movie. It's a perfect movie that got fucked up in the 90s, and now we can't watch the original version. But it's still just such an incredible story, incredible journey, and so much fun. Just so many classic set pieces, and the cast are amazing. The Curse. I did a whole video on this, like a big ass video on this, so I won't talk too much about it now. But yeah, I've been loving this show. I've been watching it every week and really, really enjoying it. And then got so excited for the finale and counted down the minutes to watch the finale. And then it goes full supernatural horror on you at the drop of a dime after 9.5 episodes of no supernatural elements whatsoever. And I was so freaked out by it, it got so much under my skin that I had a really bad panic attack. But I still loved the show. You know, when I went back and finished the finale after it calmed down, I thought it was a really incredible ending, and I can see why. Some people are disappointed by it because there seems to be a lot of plot threads going through the first 9 episodes. And then the 10th one throws a lot of them out the window for this ambiguous kind of ending. But, I don't know, it worked really well. I feel like if they had just done a standard ending where you resolve those plot threads and just have like a typical TV finale, we wouldn't be discussing it quite as much because there wouldn't be as much to discuss. Whereas the wild left turn they take, where it kind of connects to what came in the first 9 episodes and kind of doesn't at all, was kind of ingenious. But anyway, if you want to know more about my thoughts on the show, on my thoughts on the ending and my experience of having a panic attack watching it, then that's all covered in the video. It's called I Had a Panic Attack Watching The Curse. Thought that'd be a grabby title. Fargo Season 5. I finished watching my press screeners of these, so I could do like a Fargo Season 5 ending explained piece, and a few other articles. And this was the kind of finale I think some people hoped they would get in The Curse, where all the plot threads from throughout the season get resolved. Even the weird one that Loudermilk, or whatever his name was, it's spelt Old Munch, but he pronounced it like Loudermilk or something like that. The whole thing where he was a sin eater in the 1500s. Even that is paid off, and even that gets some resolution and some explanation. But which finale was better? I don't know. I think The Curse had a more memorable finale. You know, the Fargo Season 5 finale was just a typical finale. It was the climax of all the stuff we've been watching. Whereas The Curse was like TV unlike anything I've ever seen. But they were both great seasons of television. They both ended in a really cool way. Onward. I actually really like Onward. I think it got sort of lukewarm reviews, and because it came out in cinemas like a week before the whole world went into lockdown for the pandemic, it didn't do so well at the box office. This was actually the last film I saw in a cinema before the lockdowns. I thought it was a great note to end on, end the pre-COVID era on, because imagine how disappointed you'd be if the last film you got to see in a cinema before you couldn't go back to a cinema for like over a year was something shit that you didn't like. Imagine if it was Birds of Prey or something like that. But I thought Onward was fantastic. I mean, you could start to see, it was like The Last of Us Episode 1, where you start to see the pre-apocalyptic warning signs. You know, where the whole time me and my friend were driving to the cinema, on the radio, they're just talking about the pandemic and how it's going to spread and it's going worldwide. And then we get there and it's this new Pixar movie. It should be a huge hit. It was just me and him and a woman and a couple kids and no one else in the cinema. I thought it was a great movie. I thought it was really touching. I love Tom Holland and Chris Pratt have really great chemistry as brothers. And it's just a really beautiful, touching story where they're trying to bring their dad back for one day with magic. And the longer it takes to try and figure out how to bring him back, the days getting shorter and shorter. And the way, if you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it, but the way it culminates at the end is so beautiful and so moving. And it's, I mean, me and my friend were bawling our eyes out in the cinema, but I don't have any brothers, and the whole thing is about the power of an older brother and about the, like how special that bond can be and how much they can mean to you. And the friend I was with has 2 older brothers. So it really connected with him, but I was in tears, and again this time watching it again. It's just a really beautiful movie. I actually think this is one of Pixar's best. I think this is up there with the best. Sing 2. We had a great time watching Sing. I was back at my parents' house a few days later, and they, even though they had all loved Sing 1, none of them had seen Sing 2. So we watched Sing 2, and that's just as great. I thought maybe it would be, it doesn't fall into the trap of a sequel, just rehashes the first one, or, just rehashes all the jokes from the first one. It brings back all the characters well, not all the characters you love. I actually would have loved to see Seth MacFarlane's Mike the Mouse come back. His, the crooner Frank Sinatra the Mouse. He was my favorite character in Sing 1, so I was a bit disappointed he wasn't in Sing 2, but most of the characters are back from the first one. You've got Ash and Johnny and Buster Moon and Miss Crawley. And it's the same sort of story where it's like, let's rally together, put on a great show against all odds. But there's all new caveats to it this time, where you've got the venue owner wants his daughter to be in the show and she's not very talented, or they need to get this aging recluse rock star to come out of retirement and play the gig for them. I thought it was just terrific. I can't wait to see Sing 3 if that ever gets off the ground. Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire. I'm lukewarm on Zack Snyder. I don't hate him as much as some corners of the internet do, but I certainly don't love him as much as some other corners of the internet do. His movies typically are fine. They're not great stories, but there's usually some interesting visuals or some cool slow-motion action, or, he has made bona fide great movies. His Dawn of the Dead remake, against all odds, was fantastic. Not as great as the original, but a fresh new spin on it, and a really scary zombie movie. And 300 is a great fucking movie. And Watchmen, it's such a tired, hot take to say, it misses the point of the source material. The source material is all about how we shouldn't glorify superheroes, and his movie glorifies the superheroes. But he did a really great job of translating those incredible visuals from the comic, the amazing Dave Gibbons illustrations from the comic, and, putting them on the big screen. And it's, whatever that's worth. But ever since the Snyder Cut movement, where legions of fans came out of the woodworks to demand Warner Brothers to give him $70 million to finish his version of Justice League, and then he goes and makes a 4-hour black and white superhero movie in 4:3 aspect ratio, which it wasn't even filmed for, so there's awkward cropping done to make it an Academy ratio for God knows what fucking reason. He's kind of gone a bit overboard and got a bit indulgent, and Army of the Dead was Army of the Dead as a premise should have been like Escape from New York. It should have been a zippy 100-minute, sci-fi action horror movie. It didn't need to be this 2.5-hour somber epic, because it really doesn't work as one. But there was things in Army of the Dead to enjoy. The cast were great, and some of the opening credits, I think it is, where there's a montage of zombies taking over Las Vegas. That looked really cool. That was really well done. And so I didn't go into Rebel Moon with really high hopes, but I thought it might have 1 or 2 redeeming qualities at least. And I'm sad to say it doesn't. It's an absolute piece of shit. It's an absolute piece of garbage. It doesn't even really have some cool visuals. There's one slow-mo shot of a guy jumping on the back of a giant blackbird, which is kind of cool, but it's really not worth sitting through 2 hours of movie to get one kind of cool silhouette shot. I don't think this story needed to be split into 2 halves, because really part 1 is just, the whole thing is getting the band back together. They go to one old retired gunslinger that they used to know and say, hey, we need to go and protect this village. And then say, okay, let's go. And then they go to the next old retired gunslinger and they say, hey, let's go and protect this village. And they say, okay, let's go. And then they go to another gunslinger and say, hey, do you want to help us protect this village? And they, okay, let's go. And it's just that over and over for 2 hours and whatever minutes. That whole thing could have been a montage. That could have been 8 minutes long, but it's the whole fucking movie. And Charlie Hunnam, I don't know what the hell accent he's trying to do. It seems to be Irish, but it slips in and out of all sorts. There's tinges of Scottish and maybe some, I don't know, Scouser or Birmingham or something like that is thrown in there. I mean, just the whole thing plays like a 13-year-old edgelord doing Star Wars fan fiction, where you know, a kid who thinks sexual violence makes a story cool. You know, but he's a grown man. And I'm sure Zack Snyder's a really nice guy in real life. He seems to be a really great guy. So if I have an issue with a couple of his recent movies, I don't have an issue with him personally. He seems wonderful. But he's just, since the Snyder Cut thing, it's like studios have been willing to give him as much creative control as they would give to like Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan. But he doesn't quite have the discipline or the artistic command of those guys, or the storytelling ability, really. Another thing that kind of bothered me, this is the one issue I take with Zack Snyder personally, and it has to do with Rebel Moon, is because in the press tour for Rebel Moon, Zack Snyder and his co-writers and all the cast were going on and on about how this is an original movie and it's not related to any IP and it's a completely original movie. But there isn't a single original idea in this. You know, the Seven Samurai story has been done a million times. Even within Star Wars, it's been done. They've done about 5 different Seven Samurai things in Star Wars. There was the Mandalorian episode, and it was originally a Star Wars pitch, and you can tell not much has been done to change that. There's even lightsabers in the fucking movie, and there's just so many things copied from Dune or Warhammer or Heavy Metal magazine. You know, there isn't a single idea or concept in this movie that hasn't been done a million times better in other things already. It kind of plays like one of those asylum mockbuster movies, but it actually has a budget and it has like real Hollywood A-list talent in it. But somehow it still looks like that. It's like $100 million movie, but the CGI looks like they did it for like $3 million for the Sci-Fi Channel. I really didn't like Rebel Moon. Part 2 is coming out in a couple of months, and I kind of feel obligated to watch it just because I've seen part 1. But I have no interest in seeing where this story goes. I can't even remember half of it now, even though it's only been a couple of weeks, because it just wasn't that memorable of a movie. It wasn't that great of a movie. Monty Python's Life of Brian. This is just classic comedy. You know, as a kid, I grew up going to church every Sunday, which I've not done in a fucking while and don't intend to go back to anytime soon. But, you know, going to church every Sunday, going to a Catholic school, and having to even go to church services during the week, not even on Sunday, during the week at school. And being, you know, indoctrinated with religious studies. That was a mandatory lesson right up until you can finally choose your own subjects in sixth form. And they would entertain the idea that you could discuss other religions, you could discuss Judaism or Islam or atheism even, you know, the possibility that God isn't real. They would suggest such ideas because I think they were legally required to. But 99.9% of those lessons were all about, you know, God is real and he created you and he loves you, but he also, if you step out of line, he will send you to be tortured forever. And his son Jesus came down to earth and he was crucified for our sins and all that bullshit, which we were taught from age 6 or whatever, when you're too young to even know to question it, to like age 17, when you are way old enough to be like, what the fuck is all this shit? So as someone with that whole upbringing, Life of Brian was a very special, very near and dear to my heart when I first watched it as a kid. And I will periodically revisit it. And it just holds up so well. You know, I've kind of often said that Holy Grail is the best Python movie, and Life of Brian's a very close second. But I don't know, I think they might be on par. They both have that thing where they just jump from joke to joke to joke to joke to joke, and you don't get a second to breathe, and every single bit lands. And it's just, you know, a really funny, really silly movie, but also a really biting and thought-provoking satire of religion and of the origins of Christianity. And the ending, I mean, spoiler if you haven't seen it, but who hasn't seen it? The ending where Brian and everyone else is getting crucified and they all just start singing, "Always look on the bright side of life." That's one of the greatest movie endings of all time. Certainly for a comedy, you know, for an ending, because with comedies, the ending sort of has to act as like the punchline of the whole movie. If the whole movie is one big elaborate joke, then the ending has to be like the perfect punchline for that joke. And Always Look on the Bright Side of Life, musical number up on the cross about to be crucified, and the you know, the hilarious irony of that is the perfect punchline for Life of Brian. Ted. I watched Seth MacFarlane's Ted series. I got early press screeners for this as well, which is really exciting. I've been getting a lot of these press screeners lately. And I wasn't sure how good it would be. I thought Ted 2, I liked Ted 2, but I thought it was a massive drop down from Ted 1. So I was worried the TV show might be like a step down even from there. But I thought it was fucking great. I think it actually might be better than both the movies. This is maybe like the best Ted thing in the franchise. Because the humor is like, sort of harks back to peak Family Guy, like primo Family Guy from like 15 years ago when Seth MacFarlane was still writing for the show. Where it's like really silly, but it can also turn really dark, but still remain silly when it goes dark. And I thought the whole cast was terrific. I thought, obviously, Seth MacFarlane's really funny in the role of Ted. And it's really impressive that he could just phone it in and have CGI people put the bear there, and then he just does the voice. But he does motion capture for the character, and it kind of brings him to life. And the kid who plays young Mark Wahlberg, hang on, I'm gonna look up their names. Max Burkholder as John Bennett. He's brilliant. He's not just doing a Mark Wahlberg impression. He's like this character when Mark Wahlberg played him. He's like in his 30s and still really immature and dumb, but has a good heart. And Max Burkholder captured that so well and kind of brought more depth to it than Wahlberg did. And he has great chemistry with Seth MacFarlane as Ted, and it's not easy to have great chemistry with a character who's not actually there. At least Seth MacFarlane was there doing the motion capture, so he did have someone to act off. But, I think he did a better job of making friends with a CGI character than, like, James Marsden in the Sonic films, or James Marsden in Hop. Georgia Wiggum as Blair. It's kind of weird now that Blair is a part of the Bennett family, but she's never mentioned in either of the two movies, and she didn't even go to John's wedding. But you can kind of explain that away of maybe she was at the wedding, but she was off screen, or maybe she's out of the country or something like that. She couldn't make it. And either way, I think it's worth having, because she's a great character to have in the house. Because I absolutely adored Scott Grimes as John's dad, Matty, because he's kind of like the Archie Bunker kind of, the old fusty conservative guy who sits there with the newspaper and complains about the government. And Georgia Wiggum's there as Blair. She offers like a counterpoint. She's the Mike Stivic of the dynamic, where she can challenge his conservative views with her liberal views, and that becomes an interesting dynamic. But there was some scene Scott Grimes had in the show that I was laughing so fucking hard. I actually thought I was gonna die because I couldn't breathe. And every time I was trying to like take deep breaths and stop laughing, I couldn't. Like there's this one scene, and I think episode 2, I won't spoil what happens, but he gives this sort of like grizzled deer hunter style monologue about his time in Vietnam. But the story he's telling is so absurd. It just, throughout that whole monologue, I couldn't stop laughing. My stomach hurt and my face hurt because I was laughing so fucking hard. And Alana Ubek, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, as Suze, the mom. She's so funny in this. She's played Lexi and Cassie's mom in Euphoria, also called Suze. But she plays the classic outspoken wino mom in Euphoria. She plays like so the opposite in this, where she's so sweet-natured and so agreeable. She doesn't want to come off as mean or offensive in any way possible. Like when on Halloween night, she hides a chocolate bar for John to go and find to cheer him up, and she can't even do that game. She can't even like give him a clue to where it is because she feels like she's deceiving him. It's hard to explain what makes her so funny. You just sort of have to watch it, but she's so great. But I really hope they do a season 2 of Ted. I thought this was so funny. Like normally with these press screeners, I'll just watch them once and then, just gather the information I need to write the pieces I'm going to write. But in this case, I ended up watching the whole series front to back like 3 times in 1 week. It was just so funny. I really, really hope there's a season 2, because 7 episodes isn't enough. Priscilla. I went to watch Priscilla with my dad. We're both Elvis fans, and my nan came with us. She wanted to watch it too, and we were kind of nervous going in. Like, does she know what this is? Does she think this is, this isn't like a storybook version of the love story. This is like completely the opposite of the storybook version. This is the very bleak and harrowing and kind of scary reality of it all. But she ended up enjoying it. We all ended up enjoying it. It was, enjoying it probably is the wrong word, because it's a very bleak film. It's not enjoyable per se, but it's a very interesting, peek behind the curtain. And it's, I don't know if Elvis was this over-the-top abusive. The reality probably is somewhere in the middle of the sanitized version from Elvis and the really bleak, harrowing version from Priscilla. But this one certainly felt a lot more real than Elvis did. The acting was amazing. Kaylee Spaney as Priscilla, as playing her as this sort of like a kid, essentially, who's thrust into this very adult world, and suddenly everyone knows who she is, and she's going out with the most famous man on earth, and he's much older than her, and if she even tries to question, if she thinks he's being unfaithful, or she thinks he's neglecting her a bit, then he flies off the handle. And I thought Jacob Elordi and Sofia Coppola as director did a really great job of showing that a big part of Elvis's erratic, abusive behavior is that his dependency on drugs was getting worse and worse. Because he starts off not that bad when he meets her in Germany. Was it Germany? I think it was Germany. And then as the years go by and he gets more and more famous, he's been, Colonel Tom Parker doesn't give a shit. He's sending him on all these tours and doing all these movies. And just to get by, he's hooked on these drugs. And as his dependence on the drugs gets worse and worse, he gets further and further from the guy that Priscilla fell in love with. Really heartbreaking stuff. And I thought it was really interesting. This is a spoiler, so don't, skip ahead if you don't want the ending spoiled. But the ending was really great, I thought, because, the way, just using Dolly Parton's version of I Will Always Love You makes it so emotional. Even though it is kind of a triumph that she left, and you've been wishing for the past hour, Priscilla, you gotta get out of there. The end of any relationship is sad. And I thought it was a really interesting image to end on. That she's leaving Graceland, she's going to those gates with the musical notes on, and there's this sort of huge crowd of fans at the gate staring in, and it was this interesting parallel of they're looking in at what they assume is a glamorous life, and Priscilla is escaping what turned out to be a very bleak reality. It's an interesting contrast of, what you might think living with Elvis would be like from standing at the gates of Graceland looking in, and what we know from being in Priscilla's shoes and seeing it through her eyes, that it's not that great. I thought it was a really, really well-made movie. Maybe my favorite movie Sofia Coppola's ever done, although I do love Marie Antoinette and Lost in Translation and The Virgin Suicides. Okay, maybe it's fourth, I don't know. I really liked it though. My only complaint was that it's really quiet, and I brought in a big bag of Doritos. So I think everyone in the 10-foot radius of me, my dad included, were very pissed off. They're trying to listen to these very sobering, very intense conversations, and I'm just there. But, what are you gonna do? Society of the Snow. I've never seen Alive, the original version, the original movie version of this story. But this one apparently is a much more historically accurate version, especially because even just having the actors speak in Spanish already makes this much more accurate than Alive. But I thought it was really well done. I thought it was a really interesting choice to tell it from the point of view of the dead, rather than the point of view of the survivors. A lot of the movie is spent with dying people and people who are going to make it, arguing over whether or not they'll eat them when they die. There's a lot of, it's okay, when I die, you can eat my flesh. It's like, no, I would never eat your flesh. No, you're gonna have to survive, though. Oh, but I couldn't, though, because I love you. But yeah, okay, but I love you, and I want you to live, eat my skin. But, that's interesting dialogue. That's not verbatim what I just did, but the plane, I talked about this in my video about the curse, but the plane crash scene is so fucking effective, so brutal, and so it just hits you on a really visceral kind of gut level. Mainly because you hear and you see every single bone break. If someone's leg is snapped the wrong way, you're gonna see that happen. You see that happen about 5 times in the space of 10 seconds. And, heads are slammed into the backs of chairs and you hear a skull crack. It's just, it's horrible. But effective. It's supposed to be horrible. It's really brilliantly done. That might be the most horrifying plane crash scene I've seen in a movie. Although the one in Castaway is really effective too. Miracle Mile. It's a really interesting little movie from the 80s with Anthony Edwards, where this guy goes to a diner to pick up his girlfriend, and he's late and she's already gone home. He goes to the payphone to call her and apologize. And then a call comes through on the phone meant for someone else, or someone's got the wrong number or something, and he answers it. And this guy thinks he's talking to his dad, and he tells him that he's got a high-level government position, and he tells him that nukes have been launched and there's going to be a nuclear holocaust that ends the world in an hour. And so then the rest of it kind of plays out in real time as these nukes are coming and they try and figure out whether to believe it or not, and if they believe it, what are they going to do? Are they going to try and get out of town, or where can they go? Where will be safe? It's really interesting and still relevant today. At the time, the Cold War was the big relevant thing and people were actually worried there might be a nuclear holocaust, but that's still low-key an issue today. No one at schools are being told how to react in a nuclear holocaust anymore. That's not really, it's not quite as prevalent as it was in the 80s, but it's still a big deal. At any moment now, Kim Jong-un could hit a button and there could be nukes on their way. So it's kind of interesting to watch a movie that just plays out that reality. Loudermilk. This popped up on Netflix. I I think it's doing quite well on Netflix. They're still in the top 10, whatever that means. It was a really great little comedy. It's, Peter Farrelly was one of the creators, and Ron Livingston plays the title character, Sam Loudermilk. He's a recovering alcoholic, and he used to be quite a notable music critic, but now he can't go on the road with rock bands because he can't be around alcohol. So he just runs his AA group. Or it's not AA, it's like, I think it's called Sober Friends. It's like AA. It seems better than AA, actually, because it's not about a higher power. It's not like what is essentially a religion. It's it's more just like get together in a group, talk about your problems, and try and help each other. Which seems like a better way to do it, although a lot of the people in Loudermilk's group relapse over the course of the series, so I don't know how effective it is. But it's this really interesting exploration of sobriety. It's, for the most part, it's Loudermilk is like a Larry David type character, like a curmudgeon who's just going through his daily life. He gets into confrontations with people over nothing issues, and that's all very fun to watch. But then the other half of it is that it's about sobriety and about how hard it is to stay sober and how it's an ongoing battle. It's even if you've been sober for 20 years, you could still relapse. And it's still that thing. It's still looming over you. It's a really good show. It doesn't end conclusively. It went for 3 seasons and then it was kind of cancelled, but it leaves some things up in the air. So fingers crossed, if it does well enough on Netflix, they might commission like a season 4. Time Season 2. I never watched Season 1 of Time, which I think had Sean Bean and Stephen Graham. It's like a BBC drama series about like life in prison. So the first season was a men's prison. I didn't watch that one. Then the second season, my parents had been watching it and they said it was great and they should check it out. So I watched just Season 2. I didn't watch Season 1. But it's sort of an anthology thing where each season is its own story. So Season 1 was in a men's prison, Season 2 is in a women's prison. And this one has another great cast. The first season was Sean Bean and Stephen Graham. This season has Jodie Whittaker, who's like a single mother, who's in prison for fiddling the lecky, which she said that about 10 times before I figured out what it meant. It means like to manipulate the electric meter in a way that you get away with getting more electricity than you're paying for. I thought it meant selling drugs or something. I thought it was slang. And Tamara Lawrence is great in it. She plays another prisoner who I won't spoil what she did, but it's fucking bad. It's like the worst thing a human being can do. And Bella Ramsey. Bella Ramsey was really the reason I watched it. Was like, I may not have given it a chance or been as quick to give it a chance if I didn't know that Bella Ramsey was going to be in it. With another standout performance. I mean, Bella Ramsey's had a hell of a fucking year. Bella's character, Kelsey, she's in prison for some sort of drug-related stuff. She's like addicted to crack, I think, or speed or something. I think crack. And when she gets to prison and they're doing all the medical checks and things, they find out she's pregnant. And so all 3 of them have this really interesting arc where the Jodie Whittaker character wants to get out for her kids because she's no one else looking after the kids. Her mum's an alcoholic, so the kids stay with her mum for like 2 nights before her mum gets really drunk, even though she absolutely promised she wouldn't. And the kids are taken away and split up into foster homes. So she's desperate to get out of jail and reunite with her kids and get them back together. And I thought it was really realistic and interesting to show that the younger kids don't really know what's going on, and they still, when they show up, they're really happy to see their mom and everything. But the older one, who's a bit more savvy to what's going on, is really resentful of his mom. And when they go to visit, he doesn't want to come in and see her. And you can understand where he's coming from, but you can also see how that would break her heart. And Jodie Whittaker plays it brilliantly. And then the Tamara Lawrence character, she's got to live with having done this terrible thing, and when everyone finds out what it is, they all hate her. And then with the Bella Ramsey character being pregnant, then you find out all this stuff about, I didn't even consider that, like what happens when a woman is pregnant in a women's prison. And they have this like special facility where you can go and raise your kids sort of in prison. And I didn't even know those kinds of facilities existed. So it's very eye-opening stuff. It was just really great, really well acted by those 3. And it's only 3 episodes. It's like 3-hour-long episodes. It's almost like watching a long movie. I watched the whole thing in one sitting. When I sat down to watch it, I thought, okay, I'll watch 1 episode, see how that goes. And I got engrossed, and I watched the whole thing in one go. Society. This was kind of a letdown only because of how much it's been built up. It's supposed to be like one of the most fucked up horror movies ever made. And like the last 10 minutes of it are as fucked up as I'd been led to believe. But I thought the whole movie would be like that. But it wasn't. It's like a standard movie until those last 10 minutes. So that was a letdown. But that climactic sort of like body horror orgy sequence was incredibly well done. So I give them points for that, even though I thought it would be that stretched to a whole movie. Saltburn. I rewatched Saltburn when it came on Prime Video because I felt like it needed a second viewing to maybe spot any foreshadowing or anything like that. And it's kind of it's not really clever enough to reward a second viewing like that, where it's suddenly like watching a whole new movie. But you know what? It's entertaining. It's so entertaining. And a lot of people have been complaining about like, it's not quite as smart as it thinks it is, or it doesn't really have anything to say about the class divide or whatever. And that's valid, because you can tell this movie thinks it is saying a lot, and it's not really saying anything. But just as a piece of entertainment, I think it works spectacularly. I do think that Rosamund Pike was robbed of an Oscar nomination, but that was a very competitive category. And Barry Keoghan was robbed of a Best Actor nomination. Screw Bradley Cooper in Maestro. That spot should have been taken by Barry Keoghan for Saltburn. Bradley Cooper might have learned how to conduct accurately, but did he strip naked and dance through the halls to Murder on the Dance Floor? No, I don't think so. That's a fearless actor right there. Poor Things. Poor Things finally came out in the UK, and I fucking loved it. I couldn't include it in my top 10 movies of 2023 because it didn't come out in 2023 in the UK. But now I'm thinking it's going to place pretty high in the top 10 of 2024 because I fucking loved it. If I had seen it in 2023, I think I would have placed it. I think in second place. I would have placed it, below Bottoms but above Past Lives. I thought it was a fucking masterpiece. I thought Emma Stone did an incredible job of playing like a grown woman with the mind of a child, like in the way she carries herself when the movie starts out. And she's sort of like walking around like a baby who's still figuring out how to hold up their own head. And then, as it goes on, she gets more confident with the movements. But she still, when she's like has the mental age of like a 5-year-old, she still has no filter, and she's still saying things that a 5-year-old would say, but it's coming out of a grown woman's mouth. And that created so many hilarious situations, like when she's at dinner with some people and it's supposed to be this dignified, civilized situation. Because all that stuff, she hasn't internalized any of that because she's not yet savvy to any of society's rules. So when there's a baby crying in the restaurant, like the thing you're supposed to do is just ignore it. But she says, "Excuse me, I have to go and punch that baby." I just thought that was so funny, that all those moments were so funny. I thought it was so refreshing that it's like an art housey type movie that's completely accessible. It has the really lofty, interesting themes of an art house movie and the sort of gonzo visuals of an art house movie. And that was so impressive, the sort of steampunk of it all, the steampunk aesthetic of it all. But it's accessible to the casual moviegoer. It works just as a comedy. And that's so rare. So many movies like this are just so far up their own arse and so fucking pretentious. And this was like a completely unpretentious art housey movie. I had a huge grin on my face through the whole movie. And my friends who went to see it, they think I'm a fucking lunatic for having enjoyed it, because they were very uncomfortable. But I don't know, I just loved it. I think it might be my favorite Yorgos Lanthimos movie. Granted, I've not seen all of them. I've seen all the ones in English. And this is certainly my favorite of them. I loved, like, what Emma Stone's been saying in interviews about this character, and what she loves about the character is that it's a woman who has no shame. It's a woman who hasn't been ingrained by society to feel shame about literally everything. And the movie has so much fun exploring the freedom of that. And, I love the running joke that, like, she's surrounded by these men who keep trying to control her, and like the Mark Ruffalo character is this really jealous, insecure guy who wants her all to himself. And it, like, destroys his brain to find out she's been with someone else. And I loved the running joke that, like, she's surrounded by these men who keep trying to control her or tell her what to do. And even when she has the mental age of a 3-year-old, she's already more mature than these fucking guys, these insecure guys. And I love to see that there's this movie with this female character who is very sexual and very, sexually liberated, and the movie doesn't judge her for that. That she's not vilified for that, which was so refreshing to see, because that seems to be all you ever see. If there was a character like that, if there's a female character who, God forbid, enjoys having sex, then she's like the bad guy. So it's just great to see a movie with a character who discovers sex and likes sex, and the movie is okay with that. I thought it was a masterpiece. I really enjoyed it. The Other Guys. When I had my panic attack watching the Curse finale, and I called my friend Luke, and he was sort of calming me down. He was at that time watching The Other Guys, and he recommended I do the same, because it's like, it's the opposite of The Curse. It doesn't make you uncomfortable. It's a really funny, goofy comedy. It makes you comfortable. And it's so fucking funny. I hope Adam McKay someday goes back to making straightforward comedies. Because, movies like The Big Short and Vice are fine, but, and those are the movies that win him Oscars, but, his greatest cultural achievement is making movies like Anchorman and Step Brothers and Talladega Nights and the other guys that are just these completely absurdist comedies. And there's just something about the way Adam McKay's comedic voice is so perfectly attuned and in harmony with Will Ferrell's, that when they get their heads together to come up with something, they create something really magical. So I would love to one day see Adam McKay return to just making a comedy like the other guys, where it's just like it's a buddy cop movie and it follows all the familiar beats of a buddy cop movie, but in kind of the most surreal way possible, and with these really these running gags that are just so stupid, but in a really good way, in a funny way. Like the way Michael Keaton keeps quoting TLC lyrics and he doesn't even know what TLC is, and all the stuff that happens to Alan's Prius, and the whole thing where Terry learned to do these things like play the violin or dance ballet to make fun of kids who were doing that, but he learned to do it amazingly, to make fun of them for it. It was so good, and it was effective. Luke was right, it calmed me down, and I was able to finish The Curse. Bottoms. I watched Bottoms again because it's kind of becoming my go-to end of a night out movie. It's if you come in from the pub and you've had a few and it's past midnight but you're not quite ready to go to sleep yet, Bottoms, I'm finding, is a really great movie to stick on, because there's no fat, you don't have a second to get bored. It's another, like Life of Brian, it's like every scene has a ton of laughs and lands and needs to be there to move the story forward and also to develop the characters. And it takes it every time there is an opportunity for a joke, it crams one in there and it's hilarious. I'm starting to think this movie, it is without a doubt my favorite film of 2023, but now I'm starting to think, it might even climb its way into my top 10 of all time. Evil Dead Rise. Evil Dead Rise popped up on Netflix. I hadn't seen it since it came out in cinema, so I gave it a rewatch. And it's a really well-made Evil Dead movie. The sort of MO of the Evil Dead franchise is the thing that separates the Deadites from other movie monsters is they don't just want to kill you or they don't just want to possess you. They want to fuck with your head. If they can get inside your mind and torture you that way, that's sort of their lifeblood. That's what they feed on. They feed on your confusion and terror. And the perfect Evil Dead movie is something that can do that to its audience by showing you Deadites doing it to people. And this one really sinks its claws into you. It really, there's just nasty things like a tattoo needle to an eyeball or a cheese grater scraping off a piece of someone's leg. It's also nasty, but in such a great way. It's a great way if you like gore. What If Season 2? I only got a few episodes into this. I don't have to write as much about Marvel stuff as I used to. It used to be half the articles I was writing were about Marvel stuff, so I had to watch every single new Marvel thing. But now I'm not required by my job to keep up with the MCU. I'm not doing a great job of it, because, I haven't seen Echo. I could barely get through 2 or 3 episodes of What If. And it's the same as the first season, where the animation is stunning. It's just that the scripts they're bringing to life with that animation aren't that good. Or a couple of them are good. But just on the whole, it's very mediocre. If you've seen What If Season 1, you're on the fence about whether I should watch Season 2. I don't know. Don't bother, I would say. Unless you're really into animation, because you'll get a ton of great animation out of this, but it's just, story-wise, I can only speak to the first few episodes, but it's not a good sign if the first few episodes make me not want to bother with the next few. Red Rocket. There's another movie by Sean Baker, who I spoke about the Florida Project a couple of months ago. I really, really enjoyed that. And I really enjoyed his movie Tangerine, which was filmed on an iPhone. So I was primed to really enjoy Red Rocket, and I did really enjoy Red Rocket, but I didn't think it was as great as the Florida Project. It's about this sort of middle-aged ex-porn star, and he's getting on, so he's not getting much porno work anymore. He goes back to his hometown and moves in with his estranged wife and her mom, and then he's trying to get work, but there's a huge gap in his CV, and every potential employer asks him, what were you doing for all these years? And he has to admit, well, I was making porn, and then they say, okay, you're not going to work here. So he sort of reluctantly gets work as a drug dealer. And then he meets this 17-year-old girl at a donut shop and starts dating her, and things don't work out that well for him in the end without spoiling anything, but I don't think the movie is appropriately against his very inappropriate relationship. The movie kind of seems okay with him being in love with a 17-year-old girl. But, just because it's not as great as the Florida Project, that doesn't mean it's not great. It's a really well-made movie and a really interesting character study. And Simon Rex gives a really great performance in the lead role, where he's funny but also really sad and tragic. The Squid and the Whale. I hadn't seen this movie in years. Noah Baumbach's tale of divorce and the effect it has on the kids. And it has really interesting dynamics, you know, where the parents decide to separate, and then you see how they both sort of like try to adapt to being single, and one being much more successful than the other. And great performances, you know, it's Jeff Daniels and Laura Linney, and their two sons. You've got Jesse Eisenberg as the older one, and I don't know the kid's name, plays the younger one, but they both take sides, where the younger brother sort of takes the mum's side, just mainly because she's his favorite parent, and then the older one, who's like an angsty teenager, takes the dad's side because he knows that the mum had an affair and he just hates her for that, and he don't look into the nuance of like how his dad was a bad husband and that's why she was so there's just this very interesting dynamics of like the older son resents the mother, and then the mother sort of resents him back because it's like, how dare you judge me. And I feel like when I watched it the first time I was probably like 12, so I didn't understand a lot of the nuance, but now I'm watching it now and I can see that there's so much subtext and there's so many layers to these characters and their relationships, and it's really fantastic. Francis Ha will always be my favorite Noah Baumbach film. It doesn't matter what he does. Doesn't matter what he does from now, nothing's ever going to top that for me. But this one might be a second place one. To Live and Die in LA. After watching Sorcerer and being just fucking blown away by what William Friedkin did, I want to check out some of his other movies, so I got a Blu-ray of To Live and Die in LA. It's sort of like action noir. And then I enjoyed it. There's some really well-made action scenes in there, some really visceral, kind of realistic action scenes that were really cool. But I was nowhere near as impressed with this one as Sorcerer. But, you know, I thought Sorcerer was a fucking masterpiece. Capital M masterpiece. So basically anything that wasn't a capital M masterpiece was going to disappoint. But, you know, To Live and Die in LA, very well made sort of action crime thriller, even if it's not quite as incredible as Sorcerer. The Creator. This came on Disney Plus. I found it very underwhelming. Actually, when this came out, I wanted to support it in cinemas because, you know, you want to send the message, please, more original movies, less IP shit. But I never found the time to watch it when it was out. But after watching it on Disney Plus, I'm glad I didn't go to a cinema to watch it. I would have been very, very disappointed. Because it's just not that great. It's, you know, it looks amazing. Visually, it's really stunning. And I'm really impressed they managed to pull off such great visual effects on such a slim budget. You know, it really, the visual world building is really, really impressive. But the story that's all built around just ain't it, you know? It's John David Washington, I think, is a wonderful actor and can give really great performances, and I loved him in Ballers and in Malcolm and Marie, and to an extent Tenet, although I didn't even really like Tenet that much. But his performance in this was just really dull. You know, the character that this guy needed to be was like, you know, Michael Biehn or like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Total Recall. He needed to be like an everyman, but also like a badass action hero and charismatic and someone you would follow to the ends of the earth. And he really isn't. I mean, part of that's not John David Washington's fault. Part of that is it's just not a very well-written character. But, you know, we've seen a ton of these stories, these lone wolf and cub stories like The Mandalorian or The Last of Us or 65. And when they work, like in The Last of Us or like in The Mandalorian, it's because there's a really tangible parent-child relationship and you can really see the love between the characters. You can you can see that Mando loves Grogu and will do whatever it fucking takes to keep him safe. And the same with Joel and Ellie, how they start off kind of hating each other and then they go on this incredible journey and they save each other's lives a few times, and by the end of it, Joel will do absolutely whatever it takes, and we see the extent he'll go to ensure that nothing bad happens to Ellie. And those are really powerful stories because we can recognize that love. But there's really no love in The Creator. You know, it's the kid is a robot, so the kid has no emotions. And the guy who's protecting the kid, you know, it's not because he's a father figure and he is so desperate to protect this kid. It's more just the plot requires him to, so they have some conflict. You know, I see absolutely no chemistry at all between John David Washington and this kid. Whereas with Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey, you get so much chemistry. You get electrifying, beautiful chemistry. So yeah, I found The Creator to be kind of an interminable slog, but I don't want to discourage any studios from taking big risks with original stories. It's just, you know, it's the same thing as Rebel Moon. It's original because nothing with the name The Creator has been made, but it's not original. We've seen other stories that do all these different things. You know, it's like Terminator, Blade Runner, and Lone Wolf and Cub just mashed together. So it's, I don't know, I want to support original movies, but there's a key thing in there that some of the studios miss when they're making these original movies. They have to be good. So next time, if you wouldn't mind, you know, make it good. And then I'll show all the support. Maniac Cop. This is like a classic, like 80s slasher, directed by Larry Cohen, with Bruce Campbell is in it, Richard Roundtree's in it, a bunch of great actors are in it. All that really happens is a guy dresses up as a cop and kills people. But even that in itself is a really interesting conceit for a slasher villain, because it's, because like the police uniform is supposed to be trustworthy. When you see someone in a police uniform, you're supposed to feel safe. But that's not really the case. After George Floyd and all these horrible things that police have done, it's become a lot more complicated than that. It's not just you see a police uniform, you feel safe. It's become so much more complicated. And this movie came out a few years before even Rodney King. So I don't know if they were going for commentary on police brutality and commentary on, not being able to trust police uniforms or feeling unsafe around people in a police uniform. But, it's an entertaining enough slasher. Larry Cohen does a great job of building suspense when the cop shows up to kill people. And there's an interesting mystery storyline where, like, the wrong guy is accused and he has to sort of prove he's innocent. That was all a very interesting plot. And then you add on top of that there is this weird commentary, even though I'm almost 100% certain it was done intentional. It's a really interesting movie. It's actually a lot better than you would think a movie called Maniac Cop is going to be. 2.5 Men. This is the show I was watching to fall asleep to over this past few weeks. And that had already been the case a few months ago, so I already talked about it then, so I won't go into too much depth, but it's just one of my favorite shows. It's like a comfort show. The cast is incredible, and just the whole dynamic of, like, on the surface, Charlie's always complaining that Alan's a sponge, and he lets him live there for free with his kid, and how he's ruined his life. But deep down, he loves Alan, and he loves Jake, and he loves having them around. It's like, the later seasons, that sweetness was just eradicated completely. But the early seasons are so great to have this sort of, like, really biting, really incisive comedy, but also have this undercurrent of sweetness and this real sense of, like, familial love. Jurassic Park. I watched Jurassic Park with my friend Mike because he's a zoologist, and the two things he loves more than anything in the world are animals and science. And I think even his first job at a zoo was in the prehistoric predators section, and the guy had never seen Jurassic Park. So we watched it, and I was kind of worried, like, when a movie is that famous and that iconic, and you haven't seen it, but all you've heard your entire life is how amazing it is, will it live up to the hype? But my sister said, like, no, you don't have to worry, it's Jurassic fucking Park, it's such a solid movie, no one has ever watched Jurassic Park and been disappointed by it. And she was right, he loved it. And I did a whole video about Jurassic Park and how it's such a timeless masterpiece a few months ago. Most of the CGI in the movie looks incredible. It looks like it could have been made today. In fact, it looks better than a lot of the CGI that's made today. And on top of that, it's so well made. It's not just that there's these groundbreaking effects. Scenes like when the T-Rex escapes from its paddock, or when the velociraptors are chasing the kids around the kitchen. It's so fucking well directed. That's like Steven Spielberg at the absolute height of his abilities as a filmmaker. And it's like, you watch sequences like that, and it's so easy to see why Steven Spielberg is like the most famous director on the planet. Because there's just a real cinematic magic to what he does that, is unparalleled. South Park. Watched a few South Park episodes. I was around at my parents' house. They'd just got back from they'd been on holiday, and while they were on holiday, they went to like a timeshare pitch meeting to get a free boat ride. And the whole time, my dad was referencing the South Park episode where they do the same to get a free ski holiday, and they can't get out of the timeshare meeting. And my mom, even though she almost certainly has seen this episode like 5 times, she had no idea what he was talking about. So they came home and we watched it. And it's just so fucking funny, that ski episode. And then we watched the one where the boys go ziplining and they just have this most interminable experience. That I think is such an underrated one. The Aspen one will pop up on episodes of the best South Park episodes. I never see the ziplining one. I actually think some people hate it. But I think it's really underrated. I think it really captures the frustrations of, like, being with a tour group and going for a day out that you think will be fun, but there's just hours of bullshit surrounding, like, 10 seconds of fun. And then my friend Harry came over and he wanted to watch the post-COVID one, where all the kids are adults. Because it's like, the COVID was like 2 years, but it felt like 20 years. So they just aged up the kids to adults for the end of COVID. And that was an interesting one to watch, because the opening montage of all what life is like in COVID times would have been familiar when it came out. You wouldn't have thought twice about it. But watching it now, when we're a couple of years out of the pandemic, it was giving us like massive PTSD to watch, like, the family go to visit grandpa, but they're all just wearing masks and standing on the other side of the road like, hi grandpa. It was kind of scary to just remember what a fucking nightmare it was. We watched a couple of other ones. We watched the one that got the show banned in China, where Randy tries to bring integrity weed to China, and he finds that every other American company has had the idea to go after the Chinese market. It's such a brilliant show. I don't think any other animated series of its ilk, like The Simpsons or Family Guy, has been as consistent as South Park. And that's not to say that there haven't been any disappointing South Park episodes, but like, on the whole, their take on current events of today is still just as sharp as it was 20 years ago. Sideways. Sideways is one of my favorite films, and I was getting excited for The Holdovers. The Holdovers is another one, a 2023 movie that's taken fucking forever to come out in the UK. I was so excited to see another, happy, sad type comedy from Alexander Payne and Paul Giamatti. And so in the meantime, I decided to watch Sideways, and it's just so good. It's, there's another one I watched with Harry, and the way I sort of pitched it to him when I was suggesting we should watch it was that it's a sophisticated version of The Hangover. It's this like indie style movie, and they're not going to Vegas to get shit-faced, they're going to wine country to taste nice wines. But along the way, their antics are still just as debauched as in The Hangover. And that's what I really love about it. It starts off as this sort of sophisticated Fox Searchlight dramedy. It's very bold to sort of begin the movie with your so-called protagonist, the hero of the story, dropping in for a perfunctory birthday visit for his own mother, and then he sneaks in and steals money from her. And you think it's bad enough that he's just stopped by to say happy birthday, almost like as a chore. But it's even worse when you find out he's not even there to say happy birthday, he's there to steal money from her savings. So it's very bold to start off with something that makes a character so unlikable from the outset, but then so many bad things happen to him over the next few days that it's kind of still hard to not feel bad for him. And Paul Giamatti and Thomas Hayden Church play it so spectacularly, and Sandra Oh and Virginia Madsen are so great as the love interests. It's just a really, really fantastic, funny but also moving kind of movie. Role models. There's another one I watched with Harry while he was around, and it's so funny. I think this is one of the great comedies of that sort of era in like the 2000s, the late 2000s, where it kind of started with Judd Apatow. Where you would take a really raunchy comedy and then give it like a huge heart, make it like a really sweet movie. And this is one of the absolute perfect ones, because the humor is so raunchy and so out there, and there's a couple of lines, that wouldn't fly today, and that, you just have to overlook that kind of thing when you go back to comedies of that era. But just the whole arc of Paul Rudd and Sean William Scott have to do community service at like a Big Brother program and sort of mentor these boys. And they start off, they're hating it, they're not getting along with the kids, and they're just doing it to get their hour sheet signed so they can be done with community service. And then as time goes on, they really become endeared to these kids and become like father figures to these kids who desperately need a father figure. And it's like weirdly beautiful, And it's, I don't know, I just love that kind of subgenre of comedy where it's a movie that thinks like tits and farts are like the funniest things in the world, but also has this really sweet center and really manages to tug on your heartstrings. I just think it's absolutely fucking brilliant. Awkwafina is Nora from Queens. This is one of my favorite shows. I rarely go on BBC iPlayer, so I rarely see when a new season is put on there. That's where it comes out in the UK. And so I found out season 3 was on iPlayer, so I watched that and then enjoyed that so much I went back and rewatched seasons 1 and 2. And it's such a funny show, such a classic case of a show where, you've got this really lovable lead character that things never work out for her. Like, I remember watching the start of season 2. After loving season 1, I started season 2, and the opening, 5 minutes is Nora's got this job she really likes, and she's loving life, and she bumps into this guy she really likes, and they hit it off again, and then they start dating, and then they fall in love, and then he proposes to her. And I was watching that what the hell's going on here? This is the show, this is like Frasier. This is nothing ever works out for Nora. Why is all this stuff working out for Nora? And then it turns out to be a whole misdirect where suddenly she wakes up and that whole thing was a dream, and then she does bump into that guy, but he's got a girlfriend, and she does have a job she really likes, but her boss hates her and wants her out of there. And suddenly it's like, yeah, this is the show I remember. This is the show where things don't work out. I love it so much. I think Awkwafina is one of the funniest people in the world. I think maybe there's something going on, some controversy where she's considered problematic. I don't really know, but I don't really pay attention to that kind of stuff. But her movies and TV shows I love. I loved her in Shang-Chi. I loved her in Quiz Lady. I thought it was a really funny movie this year. And she's so great in this. She's so funny in this. As sort of like a version of herself. A version of herself who didn't become famous and never moved out of her dad's house. And B.D. Wong from Jurassic Park is really funny in it as her dad. He's like so lovable and so funny. And the MVP of the show, if it's not Awkwafina, is Laurie Tan Chin as her grandma. She's the fucking funniest, you know. She's everything she said, everything this character says and everything she does is so funny, and she delivers it so hilariously. It's like, even if you don't really like Awkwafina, this show is worth watching for her grandma alone. And there's a really great episode, kind of styled like a K-drama, where you see the grandma's origin story. And I was very surprised to find that that episode was directed by the Daniels. Like, pre-Everything Everywhere All at Once, the Daniels. And, you know, they direct it with as much vigor and energy and visual style and humor as Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's almost like a trial run. It's like a proof of concept. Good grief. This is the movie that Dan Levy, or Levy? Levy? I think it's Levy. From Schitt's Creek, directed. It's like his directorial debut. And he also wrote it, and he's in it. He's in the cast with Ruth Negga and Himesh Patel and Luke Evans. And Luke Evans plays his husband who, you know, it's like they're having a party and they're having a great time. And then Luke Evans is like a famous author. He has to go off and do a book tour in Paris or something. So he goes off in a taxi. And then the taxi is in a huge car crash that he dies in. And so it's like the Dan Levy character, his world is suddenly turned upside down. He's in this happy marriage, he's having a great life, and then his husband is killed, and you sort of see him trying to process the grief, and he takes his friends to Paris to stay in his husband's apartment over there as a way of trying to move on, but then you find out there's a bit of an ulterior motive, and their marriage wasn't so perfect after all. It becomes a lot more complicated. And that was a pretty great movie. Not like anything mind-blowing or anything, but you know, it worked very effectively as a story of grief and the struggle to move on. And you know, he gave a great performance in it, and I cried a couple of times with a couple of things. When he's at the beginning, when there's that car crash and he's running out and the police have to stop him because they don't want him to go and see the body. That was heartbreaking. I fucking cried my eyes out in that scene. And Caitlin Dever has an amazing cameo in it. She plays the star of the movie franchise based on Luke Evans's books. And she gives a eulogy that is more about the impact his death will have on her career because he won't finish the books to make the last movies than about, you know, losing this human life. And I thought that Dan Levy did a really great job of threading the humor into the tragedy. Because that scene with Caitlin Dever is at the tail end of just this heartbreaking montage of him trying to wrap his head around it and just not really having a reason to get out of bed in the morning and just being completely depressed. I thought it was really great. I thought he did a great job with it. Paddleton. This one actually, I didn't intend to make it like a double feature, but had some similar themes with Good Grief, where it's about the love between two men, although in this case it's a platonic, you know, friends love, and in Good Grief they're married and they're a couple, and one of them having to reckon with the idea of losing the other. And where in Good Grief it's like a sudden death. In Paddleton, Ray Romano and Mark Duplass play these neighbors who are best friends. They watch movies together and do puzzles together, and it's really sweet, and they're like each other's only friend in the world. And the Mark Duplass character has stomach cancer, and the Ray Romano character is kind of helping him through it, but he decides he's sick of the pain, he doesn't think the treatments are working, and he wants to take his own life. And so it becomes about, you know, Mark Duplass coming to terms with ending his own life, and about Ray Romano coming to terms with, I'm about to lose my only friend in the world. And it was just heartbreaking. It was like so low-key, you know, like a lot of Mark Duplass movies where but low-key in a beautiful way, where it's in a very realistic way. It's not, you know, like with Good Grief, all of the drama is heightened for like a Hollywood narrative. Whereas in Paddleton, it felt so much more real. And that, in fact, made it more touching. I mean, I cried in Good Grief, but I fucking bawled in Paddleton. Especially towards the end. Again, this is spoilers, so if you don't want it spoiled, skip ahead. But I thought Mark Duplass did an incredible job of playing when he takes the medication to kill himself. He's just lying in bed with Ray Romano, and he's coming to terms with the fact that he's about to die. The sort of like rush of emotions, and the nervousness and the fear, and then ultimately making peace. He played it so fucking beautifully, and so real. It felt so real. That he's like about to die and he's so scared, and Ray Romano's just there trying to sort of help him through it. I thought it was absolutely amazing. I mean, I knew they were both great actors going into it. I loved them both going into it, but they both showed like whole new dimensions that I hadn't seen in their other performances. I mean, it was devastating, but so good. Curb Your Enthusiasm Season 11. I was rewatching Season 11 ahead of Season 12 because the trailer for Season 12 had Tracy Ullman's back as Irma Kostrowski, whoever her name is. So Season 12 seems like it's going to pick up some of the threads from Season 11. And this was a great season. You know, the whole storyline that Larry's being blackmailed into letting Maria Sophia star in his new show, you know, creates so much comedic potential. And so, and she was so amazing. Let me just look up her name. Kayla Monteroso Mejia. hope I'm pronouncing that correct, or somewhat correctly. She's also in Abbott Elementary. She was fucking spectacular as Maria Sophia in Curb. Because it goes back to that classic thing of like, it takes a really great actor to do bad acting on purpose. And it's like, you see in all her other scenes that she is an amazing actor because she's playing Maria Sophia so believably, and you really like get to know her as a person. And then she comes in to do the audition, or she's doing the scenes on the set, and it's just painful to watch, but it's, you know, it's all intentional. She's playing it. It's like such an erratic, she can't like settle on a tone. It's just an amazing performance, and Tracy Ullman as Irma was so funny and fit so well into the Curb world. It's so rare that a show is still great in season 11, and now all they have to do is stick the landing with 12. If 12 really is going to be the final season, which I kind of hope it isn't. I feel like Larry David makes every season like it's going to be the last, but this is the first one that's being advertised as the final season, but I don't know if it will be. But if it is, they've gotten so close. All they need to do is stick the landing with season 12, and this will have been like a perfect run of a TV show. Alright, so that's everything in January. Mercifully, fewer things than I watched in December, because December got way out of hand. That was like a feature-length fucking video of me just waffling on about movies I've seen. But I don't know, now that I've had a little bit of a break in January, not watching as much stuff as I normally would, maybe I'll go back overboard again in February, we'll see. But you know, 28 days, half February, so there's fewer days in which to watch movies, so hopefully we won't have another December on our hands. But anyway, you know, good checking in, as always, and I will speak to you at the end of February. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe and click on the little bell. And also seize the day and call your mom and be kind to yourself.